We're on Mark chapter 14, and we got about a third of the way through this particular chapter, and we are in the part of Jesus' life that's leading up to the events leading to his crucifixion, and specifically the first part of Mark 14 is talking about the celebration of Passover that Jesus had with the disciples. Again, you'll remember in the Jewish way of counting time that the new day began at 6 o'clock in the evening. That's why in Genesis it would say things like the evening and the morning were the first day, or the evening and the morning were the second day. Evening came before morning because to them the new day started at 6 p.m. and then you went till 6 a.m. and then 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. were the daylight hours. So Jesus had this Passover celebration with or commemoration with the apostles, and that means at 6 o'clock then Passover proper would have been over, and again still there had been a lot of people there in Jerusalem that had come together from different parts of the world to celebrate Passover. But you'll remember that the Jewish leadership did not want to take Jesus on the Sabbath or on the Passover itself. So they wanted to wait till it was over. So these events that we're going to talk about tonight probably started around 6 o'clock in the evening after they had had the Passover dinner. And it says in verse 26, now, before I read this, let me remind you where we're at. They had come together, had had the Passover dinner. He had instituted what we call communion, had with the disciples what we call the Last Supper, and talked about his body and how it was going to be broken for them, and the blood that he was going to shed to bring about the new covenant, the New Testament. And that's what we're a part of, is the new covenant, the New Testament. We don't offer animal sacrifices and go through all these feast things like they did in Judaism, because we're not under the covenant of the old covenant. We're under the new covenant, which is we have the sacrifice. It centers around the sacrifice of Jesus and our faith in his sacrifice. So Jesus had told them when he instituted the communion, this blood represents the blood of the New Testament, of the new covenant. So the ability to get a pardon for our sins and all that goes along with that comes because of Jesus' shed blood. And so we're now under the new covenant with Jesus. So he had just instituted that, and they were leaving the room where they had had the Passover, and they were on their way to the Mount of Olives. And it says in verse 26, and when they had sung an hymn, they went out unto the Mount of Olives. So it's very interesting. The hymn that it's referring to is probably the Hallel, which they sang at Passover time. And the Hallel is, you'll find it in the Old Testament in Psalm 113 through Psalm 118. And so as they began the Passover dinner, they would start it out by singing the first three chapters, 113, 114, 115. Then when they had ended the dinner, they would sing 116, 117, 118. I'm sure they're glad that they stopped at 118, because 119 would be a pretty long hymn to sing. But that's probably what it's referring to. And so they're singing this song. And you know, one of the commentators that I was reading after a while back, when I was reading about this particular event, said that Passover occurred at the time of a full moon. That's, you know, a lot of their timing and celebrations had to do with the phases of the moon. Sometimes it was a new moon, sometimes a full moon. And so one of the commentators was writing about this scene of Jesus and his 11 walking to the Garden of Gethsemane, which sat at the foot of the Mount of Olives, and singing in the moonlight. You know, and just this picture, if you can imagine these 12 men walking to the Garden of Gethsemane by the light of a full moon, and the singing and the talking that was going on. And so they're on their way toward the Mount of Olives from their place where they'd had the Passover. Verse 27 says, "And Jesus saith unto them, Ye shall be offended because of me this night." And what that means is that you're going to fall away. You're going to abandon me. You're going to be offended because of me this night. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. That comes from Zechariah 13:7. The idea is that if you kill the shepherd that's there to protect the sheep, then the sheep become fair game, and immediately they're going to run for their lives because their protector has been taken away. Jesus said, tonight they're going to smite the shepherd and you're going to be scattered. You're all going to forsake me. You're all going to leave me. Then he says in verse 28, "But after that I am risen, I will go before you into Galilee." Which is strange because we find this, and I talked about this recently at the convention. The angels told them after he rose that he would meet them in Galilee. Well, Jesus told them beforehand that's where he would meet them. Now you remember Jerusalem's in the southern province of Judea, but most of his ministry had taken place in the northern province of Galilee. So Jesus said, after I'm risen, you're all going to be scattered, but after I'm risen, I'll meet you again in Galilee, up in the north country. Now, all of this was going over their heads. I guess in their minds, because remember, they had said before, why does he keep talking about death and these things when the Bible clearly teaches, the Old Testament clearly teaches and prophesies that the Messiah abides forever, you know? And he's talking about dying. How can he die? He's the Messiah, and the Messiah abides forever. So a lot of these things he's talking about, rising. Remember they said specifically in one place when he talked about rising from the dead, they asked among themselves, I wonder what he means by rising from the dead. So here he says, after I'm risen, I'll meet you in Galilee. And so what does he mean, risen? And you can tell this because when he died, they weren't comprehending this. This wasn't entering into their minds that he would literally rise up from the dead. It's one thing for him to raise somebody up, but for him to rise up, it seems to have been a real difficult thing for them to comprehend and understand. It says in verse 29, but Peter said unto him, although all shall be offended, yet will not I. That's a pretty brash statement, isn't it? I mentioned the other day, he wasn't just saying that he was a good Christian, he was saying he was a better Christian. You know, now, all these others that may forsake you, not me. So I think it was at the convention when I was talking about this, when Jesus has his conversation with Peter after the resurrection, he asked him 3 times the same thing. Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? Now, I've heard people explain that in different ways, but I think Jesus is saying exactly what Peter had claimed here. Peter claimed, I love you more than they do. They may all forsake you, I won't do it. And Jesus asked him after the resurrection, do you love me more than these? No. I mean, I like you, but I'm not going to say anything like that anymore. You know, he's going to learn his lesson within 24 hours that he wasn't who he thought he was. You know, sometimes you can have a view of yourself. We're going to talk about this when he gets into the Garden of Gethsemane. But folks, God, when we go through tests, it's not for God to know what's in us. God knows what's in us. Sometimes we go through tests so we can see what's in us. Because sometimes we can see ourselves through rose-colored glasses and think we're better than what we are stronger than what we are. And none of us know for sure how we're going to handle any given situation. I certainly I'm not going to say I know how I try not to anyway, look at other people and say, well, now if that was me and I was in their position, this is the way I would handle the trial they're going through. You don't know what you would do. And sometimes we're like Peter, we think we've got, you know, thou thinkest thou art a humdinger, but thou art not. We're not going to go there with that. Babs will have to explain that one to you later. But Peter said, although all shall be offended, yet will not I. And Jesus saith unto him, verily or truly. Verily is a word that's he's emphasizing the truthfulness of what I'm going to tell you. You ever heard somebody say, I'm not gonna lie about that. I say that all the time. I'm not gonna lie. Well, I sure am glad I'm not going to. But Jesus is emphasizing with verily the truthfulness of what he's saying. He says, truly I say unto thee, or it's faithful what I'm about to tell you, that this day, even in this night, not just in the next 24 hours, but before the sun comes up tomorrow, even in this night, before the cock crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice, or 3 times. You'll deny me. You'll want no association with me. You'll deny any association with me. 3 times you'll do it before the cock crows twice. I've even talked about this before, and I was wrong. I always assumed, because I'd read things, you read things and you think they must be right about that. They'd say, well, now the rooster may crow at midnight, and then it may crow in the morning when the sun comes up. We all know about the rooster crowing when the sun comes up. It's how people used to get up in the morning. They knew the rooster's crowing, the sun's coming up. But when he says, before the cock crows twice, you'll deny me thrice, when I was reading this and going over this, I noticed that later on in this chapter, he just makes the statement that the rooster crowed twice. It crowed, and then it crowed again. It didn't crow at midnight and then again at daybreak. It crowed twice in a small period of time. And so he says, before that happens, you'll deny you even know me 3 times. But he spake more vehemently. No, 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 no. No, 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 no way. There's no way. He said, if I should die with thee, I will not deny thee in any wise. They may kill me. See, you can think that in your mind. And we've had a lot of time to think about what happens if persecution really comes. I was thinking the other day, it's getting closer. Real persecution's getting closer in America, where you preach certain things, you teach certain things, you stand for certain things. You're gonna start seeing things get maybe even a little bit more physical than what it's been. And you think, boy, I've got this under control. Boy, they may put me in jail, but you're not going to find me doing this. Here Peter says, they may kill me, but I'm not going to deny you. And he was adamant about it. And then it says, likewise also said they all. So it wasn't just Peter. The rest of them said, not me. I think Peter was, he was standing out above the crowd more than the rest. But all of them claimed they wouldn't deny it. All of them said, if we are to die, we'll just die with you. I don't know that they thought that would ever happen. They expected Jesus was going to set up this kingdom, right? And so the idea that they were actually going to suffer, really suffer, I don't know that they were fully grasping that concept yet. We'll talk about that some more in a minute. It says in verse 32, and they went to a place which was named Gethsemane. And he saith to his disciples, sit ye here while I pray. Gethsemane means oil press. And it would seem it was about a half mile from Jerusalem proper to this particular point at the Mount of Olives called Gethsemane, the Garden of Gethsemane. And probably there were a lot of olive trees there, and there was probably an old an old oil press there where they pressed the grapes and got the oil from it. But the Bible describes, I believe it's in John's Gospel, that there was a little brook that went along through the garden. It must have been a very beautiful and peaceful place. Some people, and I'm one of them, I like the sound of a babbling water or rain at night, and it just soothes you when you're trying to sleep or rest. So to find a place in the midst of an olive grove and a brook nearby, just a very peaceful place. And the Bible had said that it was a place that they had resorted other times before. It wasn't the first time they'd been to Gethsemane. And that's why Judas knew where to find him. He knew where he would go. And they came to a place which was named Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit ye here while I shall pray." So he takes 8 of them. Now remember, Judas is not there, so there's just 11 of them now. So he takes 8 of them and says, "You 8 stay here." Verse 33 says, "And he taketh with him Peter, James, and John, and began to be sore amazed." The New American Standard Bible says distressed or troubled. Other places that word is actually translated afraid or affrighted. So there was some fear involved in it, there was distress involved in it. I mean, he was in toil over what he's about to go through. Let me say this. There's one scripture in Hebrews